Welcome, everyone, to episode 8 of Starcraft 2 Weekly Whine Live. I'm your host, Ace, and today I'm joined by my good friends Miro and Brock. I set this up because I always enjoy open and honest conversations about balance and design and all that stuff, but I feel like it's hard to find in the Starcraft 2 community, so I'm hoping to do my small part to change this with the show. If you enjoy, please give a like or subscribe. And this week, of course, we are going to be talking about the PTR patch, which has some massive changes to the economy, Protoss Warp Gate mechanics, and a whole bunch more stuff. And honestly, the economy changes are so huge that we're probably just going to talk about that this week. And then next week, we'll probably dig into the Warp Gate and some other stuff. So, first of all, the big change, of course, that everybody knows about is the worker changes. Starting workers going from 12 to 8, and a bunch of these mineral and gas changes. This is pretty much what we're going to be talking about today. And before we started, I wanted to give like a little bit of a summary of like what I've seen from other content creators, because I've been looking around and seeing what people's thoughts are. And I'll just go through the list. So first of all is Pig, obviously. He obviously likes this. It feels like, he's been pushing this for a couple months now. And, he thinks it'll increase early game diversity, make early game more interesting, more interaction with your opponent, less turtle stalemate games. That's kind of his stance on this. But then I had to poke around and see what everybody else was thinking, and I looked at uthermal, and uthermal said it could be a fantastic change. I honestly don't know. He thinks the early game being slower will be like a pleasant change for a lot of players, Like, not the viewers, but people actually, the experience of playing the game will be a little bit more enjoyable. And he just wants change and is not really predicting what'll happen. But if you've seen uthermal stuff before, this is in theme with uthermal, and he said the same. Like, he pretty consistently just wants things to be shaken up so that there's always something happening in StarCraft. Then I looked at Lowko. Lowko feels like it will be initially exciting, and then the game will be figured out again, and every game of StarCraft 2 will just have a couple minutes of bloat added to it. I looked at what Harstem was thinking. It seems like Harstem thinks that this will achieve the goal, being like, less of a stale meta, I guess. But it will be a temporary fix, because in a year from now, people will have figured out the early game again. I watched quite a lot of what Zombiegrub's thoughts were. From my impression, it feels like she doesn't like it because it feels like it won't actually change anything. It won't actually fix any of the issues that we're trying to address. Overall, though, like, she doesn't hate the change, and I think really her main complaint was doing this at the same time as we're doing Warp Gate changes. It's just massive sets of changes that you probably normally wouldn't want to do all at once. It's just a lot for everybody to figure out. I also looked at Winter, and it seems like Winter has a similar opinion that it won't really fix anything. Same thing with Catz. Feels like it feels like he was saying it wouldn't really fix anything. It's just sort of a shakeup that'll get figured out. And then, of course, I looked at Wardii, and Wardii really doesn't like it because it won't actually fix anything. So I'm seeing a pattern here with a lot of people that don't like the change, and also with the people who do like the change. It feels like the people who do like the change just want there to be some sort of a change. Things are stale. This could be good. And it feels like the people who don't like the change, are kind of on the stance of like, why are we just doing a random experiment? Because it's not going to actually fix any of the core issues. Yeah, that's my summary of the thoughts I've seen from all the content creators around, and it's been really interesting seeing what everybody thinks. But now we're going to dive into what our diamond scrubs over here think.
Yeah, okay. Where do we even begin?
Yeah, where do we begin? Yeah, go ahead.
So
Start
let me
us
ask
off.
you this. Let me ask you this. You're talking about it won't address the issue that is like existing. What is everyone saying the issue is that this is quote unquote supposed to fix?
Yeah,
That's a good question.
that's a good question.
The big thing that they seem to think that this is supposed to fix is that there is a lack of early game and mid game strategic diversity, which I would argue is both true and not true for a couple of different reasons. And a lack of early game interaction with your opponent, which this absolutely does nothing at all to fix, and in fact makes it even longer before you interact with your opponent.
Yeah, I would agree with that. Like, from what I've seen, it feels like, you know, if you're playing a standard macro game, it feels like it's the same game but just delayed by a minute or two. You know, like the the meme that everybody was putting on Reddit, you know, or Heaven, I guess, posted on Reddit and everybody was upvoting, was that the game is like not slowed down at all because Cyril was making his hive like 720 instead of 630, right? And other than that, it just looked like the same game. What was interesting to me was like I actually watched that game and it was like, yeah, I mean it kind of felt like the same game, but it definitely was slower. You know, like the Hellion Reaper stuff was happening roughly the same interactions, but just like 2 minutes later, you know? So I don't know. I feel like the early game, like, aggression, there's definitely some stuff that is probably feeling like it's more viable right now. But my guess is that once people figure out, like, how to reliably worker scout, like, all of this stuff is going to disappear again. You know, like, it's super dedicated to go for, like, a proxy or like, an 8-pool. And I just don't think that, like, with map rush distances and stuff, like, I don't think it's really going to make that big of a difference. I think people are just going to figure it out, and then we're going to end up with the same, like, stale meta, which I think is the other problem that people were trying to fix. You know, not just, like, lack of early game aggression. I feel like people feel like the game is stale, and they're not understanding that, like, the last major expansion was 10 years ago. You know, like, that's the inevitable result of what's going to happen here. So, I don't know. I really don't like the idea that SC2 should be a live service game. I guess is where I'm coming from on this. I've always viewed StarCraft as, like, space chess. Like, the goal of any balance patch should be to get the game to a state where you never have to patch it again. That should be our goal. You know, but that's just how I view it. A lot of other people feel like the game needs to have constant changes or people will get bored. And I don't know, I just feel like that's crazy. Just look at StarCraft or chess. It's doing great.
Yeah, I don't necessarily think it having changes is a bad thing, but I feel like if they want more strategic diversity, then the thing that you need to do is encourage strategic diversity, and changing the worker count is not going to do that. The problem with the lack of strategic diversity that people have been complaining about is that all of the strategies that people complained about in the past got nerfed, so they've kind of just pigeonholed us into one direction.
Yep. I gotta say, you know, I know you've seen this too, Miro, but it's been incredibly satisfying to see a lot of other streamers and casters and stuff talking about that, because like the idea that the game is stale purely because it's figured out, I think is crazy. Like, you're just ignoring like 10 years of history of balance patches. You know what I mean? Like, it's insane to think that. You know, it's like, okay, you know, we're seeing less, like, you know, interactions and harass and stuff like that, and it's all so turtley and straight to late game. It's like, well, gee, I wonder why that happened. Maybe if we hadn't done things like, I don't know, you know, nerfing Baneling run-bys so that they can't two-shot workers anymore, people would still do Baneling run-bys. I don't know. Call me crazy. Maybe if we hadn't nerfed the Widow Mine, people would do more Widowmine drops. I don't know. Call me crazy.
Yeah, and I'm not going to say that some of the nerfs weren't warranted, because like I've had this rant in the past. There have definitely been things that absolutely make sense to nerf, because when they exist for 6 to 10 months without any change and have essentially been an almost unbeatable build order, short of the opponent completely horrendously fucking up and throwing their entire army away, then it is a problem that needs to be addressed. But on the other hand, I also think there's a lot of things that either just don't get, don't necessarily need to be addressed. Again, the Widowmine is a great example. Hashtag link drops, I think it was one of the things that people complained about, but nobody actually really figured out how to deal with them before they were nerfed. And there's a couple other ones as well. The Oracle nerf, I think, when they changed the way the beam weapon worked as well, and it's there's so many different things and so many different changes that you can point to that go, this made this particular build worse or less effective or far too easy to hold, that it has fallen out of favor. But on the other hand, we still see we actually do see a fair amount of strategic diversity even now on live. Like, I'm literally thinking of Heroes Games versus Clem. I think it was like 2 days ago. He 4-0'd Clem, and 3 of those games were different one-base proxy builds or weird one-base Protoss shenanigans that they do.
Yeah.
It's like, yeah, okay, they're viable. You just don't see them very often.
Totally. And I mean, also, like, I'm glad that you brought that up, because the idea that we don't see cheese in like 12 worker start legacy is crazy to me. Like, I don't know where people are even getting this from. Like, when I look at the argument of like, we'll bring back all these early game aggression that we aren't seeing now, I'm like, what builds are you talking about? Like what builds are gonna be viable in an 8 worker start that aren't currently viable right
8
now?
8 pool, 10 pool, and that's about it. And those two specific ones, those two specific ones are the exact sort of things that a lot of people complained about in history as well, of specifically of build order wins. So the thing that blows my mind is the fact that we have, like, they're trying to reintroduce build order wins, and build order wins are not something that shouldn't be gone in the first place, because, like, if your build order counters theirs, then your strategy was just straight up better. Like, you had a better build order than that played better into what they were doing, and that's fine. But I also think there's an element of fuck, my brain has just left. There's an element of, like, strategic diversity that shouldn't revolve around build order wins, and if you want to bring those back, that's fine, but you're going to get all the same complaints that we had previously about how, oh, these build orders are broken, you don't know how to hold them, blah blah blah. You're going to have all of those same problems come roaring back anyway, and everyone's going to hate them.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought that up, because I think, like, I think that the only way StarCraft 2 design makes any sense is if a macro build is like the reliable, safe standard, but you can do a gamble for something aggressive. And if your opponent either doesn't react correctly, or if they're going for something that's not standard macro, and you just happen to interact in a way with it, you just get a build order win. Like, I think that should be expected as the result, right? But at the same time, if you make build order wins really strong versus like a standard macro opener, Like, that's not fun. Like, people are not gonna enjoy that. Like, I really enjoy that you brought up 8-Pool, because like I love the Viva La Dirt League music video for 8-Pool, and I loved it. I came into StarCraft 2 with Legacy of the Void, so I never experienced it, right? But like the music video, I was like, this is hilarious. I love it. Right? But then what was funny about it was like seeing people posting that now and being like, yay, we got this back. And I'm like watching the music video and I'm like, I think you guys are missing the tone of this music video. Like, I think you guys are missing the little bit like tongue-in-cheek making fun of this build. Because like it literally, like in the hook, it's like, what is it? I can't be bothered using skills, so I 8-Pool. You know what I mean? It's like, it's not a celebration of the build in the way that people are thinking it is. Like,
it's kind of hysterical.
Yeah. It's just, I don't know, you know, it's like, it's a music video that like people, to me, it looks like it's making fun of that era of StarCraft and how powerful that build was and how it's a little bit stupid, right? And then, like, people are looking at it now and it's like over 10 years later and they're like, why can't we go back to those days when we all raged at how dumb this build was? Like, what?
Because the grass is always greener on the other side, obviously.
Yeah, I know, right?
Yeah, I guarantee you if this goes through, you're going to end up having the same thing said. It's like, why did we do this? We've gone back to a slower, worse game, and it doesn't make sense. And speaking as someone who was there in Heart of the Swarm and who was there in Wings of Liberty, it was painfully slow. Like, it actually was genuinely painfully, agonizingly slow to get started. And
I know I've mentioned this to
a one base build and one base cheese where your opponent is proxying you and you were doing a one base like cheese build yourself. That's literally the only time the interaction would start even slightly faster. Otherwise, it would take like a full 3 minutes to get into the game.
Because it just takes so long to ramp up.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And
like, why did we get rid of this in the first place? People were bored.
So we actually briefly touched on this with chatters last week, right? Where it was like, why did we get rid of it? And it was because, you know, casters and players literally had to fill a good like 5 minutes where nothing was happening. And you can argue the same is happening now, and for the first maybe 3 or 4 months you might find that that's different, and then after that it's not going to be 5 minutes, it's going to be 8 minutes of nothing happening. It's going to be the same thing that we already have, but worse.
Yeah, but like stretched out. Yeah. Yeah, I'm not a huge fan of this direction.
Yeah, Brock, I'm curious to hear your thoughts because I realize I've been ranting a lot.
We've both been ranting.
I mean, that's fair. And it's interesting because, like, at first, it does seem like it would help with interaction, and it should like allow some early aggression to be more viable, because people are just so good at defending and tech comes up so quickly. It's like so easy to just like shut down most aggressions and stuff. Like in PvT meta, if you do like a proxy gate, like max packs build, where like you have 2 gates, one's proxy kind of thing, you pretty much have a timer until the cyclone comes out, and then it's like, cool, well, I hope you like what damage you got, because you're pretty much going to lose what units you have left trying to retreat unless you got a recall type of thing. So it's like, in theory, at least my understanding is the premise is supposed to be because it'll take longer for tech to like kick in, there's more time in that early game for aggressions and harassment. So like, I know you mentioned at the beginning that Pig was one of the only people who seems to really like it, and I know he's been talking about it for a while because
one of the like content creators. Like, there's a lot of people who like the change, but you know, I was just looking at content creators, and he seems like he's one of the few.
Oh yeah, that's what I meant. Because like one thing he brought up is like this will make harassment more relevant and viable just because killing a handful of workers is a higher percentage of your economy and such, and like that's the type of thing that's supposed to be good about it. But it is also interesting because it's like the longer the game is in like a specific state, the more people just have it figured out naturally and will be able to like defend and build up more.
Yeah.
It up to like a stronger point. So it's like I guess it is the question of is it more of that the early aggression was just nerfed too hard, or do we have to try and work around it so that these nerfed aggressions can work for a different reason, if that makes sense? Because that seems like to be what this is trying to do. Because the other half is like the minimal change,
what it's
which
trying
aren't as
to
relevant.
do.
But
I don't think it actually accomplishes it though. Because like I'm watching, I don't know. Like I'm sure that people will get a lot more confident with aggression once they like really understand and have mapped out like what the trades look like and how the game state will flow. But right now, what I'm seeing is that because you have so much of a less economy, like, and tech is super powerful in StarCraft 2, and who said this? Seven Spooks said this in chat. Like tech rushes might be more popular. That's what I'm noticing. I'm noticing people getting 2 gas on very low worker count on their mineral line because they're trying to hit their stim on time. Right? This tech is just super strong, right? But then the problem is you have so much less stuff and you have way less economy behind it. So you're like super fucking all in. So the aggression, it's like, yeah, it's stronger in the sense that like if you get damage, you're going to end the game a lot more reliably, right? But it feels weaker in the sense that if your aggression fails in any sense, if you just don't get enough damage, right? You have so much less at home and you're like gambling with so much that you just have like out on the map and you're like, you know, it's like 8 Marines, but it's my only 8 Marines, right?
So does that
I just
play
see people
into...
scared to move out, you know what I mean? Because they'd have less stuff.
Well, it sounds like that almost plays into like the coin flipping of like build order wins. Like, well, either this thing works or it just doesn't.
So I've seen an argument for this, right? And the argument that I've seen is in current Legacy of the Void, you don't have one of the core aspects that used to be around in old StarCraft 2, and that is the triangle of rock, paper, scissors, where econ beats tech, tech beats rush, rush beats econ. You know, the argument is that that doesn't exist anymore, but I generally find that that's not true. I mean, I'm gonna point out Nico. Okay, so Nico actually has a build that is effectively a 1-base build, right? It's like a 2-tank 8 Marine push that you shove across the map with like 4 SCVs, and you build 2 bunkers in front of them, and the goal is to essentially kill their natural, and they basically die because you have committed to a lot of units and 1-base build. Like it's not even a tech build because you don't get stim, you don't get banshees, you don't get cloak, you don't get like your tech is a factory and a tech lab with 2 siege tanks. You know, and that comes out at like 3 minutes into the game. So these sort of builds do still exist. They aren't necessarily as popular, but they are still around.
That's fair. Would you say the triangle thing is just not as prevalent then? Because you said like it's not a thing.
Well, I think from my point of view, you have to understand that Legacy of the Void has been through so many iterations. It is, as much as you might hate to admit it, it is an old game. Mm-hmm. The game has quite literally been around. Legacy of the Void specifically has been around for 10 years now. It has been around more than Heart of the Swarm and Wings of Liberty were combined. Twice over. Okay? So we have had more time to figure things out. We have had more time to iterate. We have had more time to experiment. We've had more time to perfect our builds. We have more time to see what works, what doesn't, with every change that we go through. All right? And some builds fall off because they get patched out or because people figure them out. And what inevitably ends up happening is you trend towards a macro game the more things get figured out. And that happened in Wings of Liberty, and it happened in Heart of the Swarm. It didn't change at all. Like that still happened. It doesn't matter if you were on 6 workers, on 8 workers, 10 workers, or 12 workers. It will still happen.
Yeah. And I think, the answer to that is not to completely shake up the game every year. Like, that's just crazy. If you ask me, like, once the game starts to get figured out to the point where, like, macro just feels super strong and aggression feels kind of weak, that's when we start to think about, well, can we maybe buff some of these aggression options then? If you ask me, like, that's what we should be thinking about doing. That and map pools.
Yes.
I kind of tried to... I feel like we got off on a tangent here, but I was about to bring this up earlier. Like, we've been seeing a lot of content creators and streamers and stuff talking about how, like, maybe we shouldn't have nerfed all these aggression options, and maybe we should think about adding some, like, non-standard maps back into the pool, which, is what we've been talking about for a long time between us, Miro. I know you remember all these discussions we've had.
Yes.
Because, yeah, it's like, it seems obvious to us, but I don't know. Apparently, we're not the only ones who can see that, and it's been kind of refreshing to hear that from other people, I do have to say. The discovery cycle is cool. Who's this saying?
That's L1.
Yeah, I mean, that's a fair point, I guess. But, like, I guess what I'm saying really is, like, I don't think it's worth reintroducing a discovery cycle just to keep people in the game who need that. You know what I mean? Because, like, it's not sustainable. Like, you can't just do that continually year after year and could expect the game to survive. Because, like, every time you do that, you're asking the entire player base to, like, throw out a lot of their prior knowledge and relearn things. And for some people that's fun, but for a lot of people that's not so fun. You don't enjoy that.
I want to actually bring up a point here.
Yeah, absolutely.
Now, I don't know if this is 100% true, so take this with a grain of salt. I read this off a translation of SHIN's quote, so keep that in mind. The translation may not be perfect. But SHIN, yes, the pro player SHIN tweeted out and brought up a really valid point. Okay? And this particular point is, you are, by fundamentally changing the game and starting with 8 workers, you are not just making the game slower, you are throwing out all of the work that content creators have done in the early game and bringing players in. All the bronze to GM stuff, all the build order guides, all the things that draw people in and help people to learn the game is now completely fucking irrelevant.
Yep.
Which means that new players who are looking to get into a game that should have all of this history suddenly have no foundation to stand on.
Yep.
And that's a really big problem. And all for what? So a couple of players who want the game to, looked at Heart of the Swarm through rose-tinted lenses, come back and stay for 3 weeks. That's not going to happen, because realistically speaking, if you didn't stay before, when you loved Starcraft at the start of Legacy of the Void, when the 6 worker, like before the original economic changes happened, then you're not going to stay now.
Yeah.
That's how it is. You're not going to stay now.
I totally agree with that. Like, I think at least half of these people are going to come back to the game and they're going to see one Liberator siege over their mineral line, and they're going to be like, oh, that's right. That's why I left.
That actually makes a lot of sense, yeah.
I mean, it's not... There were so many other things, and, like, the truth of the matter is, I don't know, you know, I think, like, a lot of the people who left because of that, like, it wasn't because of those changes, right? But for a lot of them, it was. Like, I want to be fair to this because it's like, I mean, we're doing the same thing right now, where it's like, a lot of us are like, I'm not going to want to play this game if we go back to 8 workers or to a lower worker count, right? And, you know, it's like, I really understand how a lot of those people felt when we went from 6 to 12, you know, and a lot of people were very upset. You know, I wasn't around for the transition of it, but I saw, like, everybody freaking out, and I was like, what is everybody talking about? It's like, oh, it used to be 6 workers. Like, I understand.
Yeah,
you know, so I get it.
It was definitely a lot to relearn everything. And to an extent, you are going to have to relearn all of your build orders, all of your everything, right? And that's fine. That's not necessarily a problem, but I guess
it's
my
annoying
point is
for a lot of people. It's
it
not
is-
like
it is
yeah, but
annoying
it's
for a
not
lot
going
of
to
people.
problem for being able to enjoy StarCraft, especially once people start making new guides and stuff.
Yeah, and I completely understand that, yes, a lot of the basics are the same in terms of your general basic macro cycle of inject creeps red make units, or supply depot SCV make like build structure make units. You know, like all of that is the same, but everything else is different.
Yeah.
You know, the maps change frequently enough that you can actually arguably balance based off just maps alone. And for the longest time, that's what Brood War did. They based off like quite literally.
Isn't that
Brood
literally how
War-
they balance
that-
Brood War?
That's basically how they
they're
balance
still
Brood
doing
War.
that to this day,
They
as
are-
far as I
They
know.
are still doing that to this
Yeah.
day. And
Like-
to bring the example of just how drastic that was. Flash was a player who was so fucking good that they literally changed maps around him specifically, and quite literally made playing it for any other Terran almost impossible. He was just that good that they had to actively make every single map in the map pool so detrimentally bad to nerf him specifically, and he still won series and games. Like, it didn't matter.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But
Glad
every
Zerg
other
has
Terran was gone.
experienced
Yeah, glad Zerg has me.
We all knew it was coming.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, and I
I'm
mean,
sitting here like, who's gonna bring up Cyril first?
you can definitely argue that Cyril has made that exact thing happen as well. And I don't know. It's just it's very frustrating.
Yeah. Oh, okay. Hang on. So Spooks is saying something that I want to talk about here. So, like, the idea that learning a build order is just memorization. And it's like, okay, fair, right? But if we're just changing things so that you have to memorize new stuff, like, how is that any better? Because the problem that I see with that is, if we're just going to change the game massively every couple years, like, the only people who are going to be rewarded by that are the people who have the time to dedicate to learning about how the new changes work every 2 years or whatever. And that's a big problem, especially when, you know, let's be honest, a lot of the player base of StarCraft is getting older and has less time to learn this kind of stuff. Like,
Yeah.
people don't want to start from square one. I made this argument on Reddit, I think, but it's a great analogy for this. It's like an MMORPG saying to its player base, hey, You remember this MMO that you guys used to play a few years ago, and you used to love it, and you spent like thousands of hours grinding in it? Well, we just deleted all of your stuff. Aren't you excited to come back and grind for it all again? Like, no. No. It's the same game. Why would I spend all this effort relearning the same game that I already know how to play? Like, it doesn't make sense. Why are we doing this? Like, what's the benefit?
Okay, I'm gonna take this analogy one step further, because this is something my wife talks about a lot, or has mentioned a lot to me in the past. So there was a MMORPG called Star Wars Galaxies way back when. And
how old is that? I don't think I've heard of that one.
Years, like a couple of decades, right? And at the time, this was one of the most varied MMOs that I have ever heard of. Now, I didn't get to play it, so I can only go off what she said. But the entire game was revolved around having players that had their own like unique individual classes, with hundreds of different classes that all had to interact with each other. And you had, blacksmiths, and you had you had Beastmaster, Terras Kasai, and all these different classes, right? And so you could become a bounty hunter, or you could do all these things. And when they changed the game, at the time, prior to them changing the game, you could only be a Jedi if your account rolled a random number that allowed you to go on this one single quest that then allowed you to become a Jedi. So Jedi were really rare and really, really powerful. But the entire game was built around this internal economy of how all these other classes interacted. So whenever you saw a Jedi, you'd just be like, holy shit, it's a fucking Jedi. And anyone who could deal with a Jedi is also absolutely fucking terrifying. And then they changed the game. And what they did was they basically took out 90% of all the classes, all the build orders, like all the builds.
Yeah, I can see where this is going.
90% of the game, okay? And overnight the game died.
Yeah, what a surprise.
And it was because at the time there was like, we want, like, I think it was the corporate was basically like, we want more Jedi in the game. So they literally rewrote the code from the ground up, and everything that my wife worked for and everything all the other players worked for, all gone down the drain.
Yeah.
And
gross.
And she logged on that day, and she said she literally went to a player who was a new player at the time.
Just gave them all her stuff.
Literally gave them everything she had, never to log on again.
Yep. And
that basically it kind of comes across as this is kind of what it feels like is going to happen.
Yeah. I had a similar experience with an MMO, which I don't want to say the name of which MMO, but they made a major change to like the underlying economy, and I had I'd grinded a lot of time in that, and I was like, I'm just gonna throw all my shit away. Because I was like, if I throw all my stuff away, there is no chance I'm gonna pick up this game again. So that was my measure to keep myself from playing the game again. It's a pretty reliable way to get people to never play again.
Now, I will
just
say,
delete everything they worked for.
This is a fairly extreme take, because I don't think we're going to be deleting everything that we've worked for. But realistically speaking, like all of our mechanics that we have learned are all still there. But everything else won't exist. Like a lot of the build orders that we used to have won't exist anymore. And you're not bringing back new builds, because the reality is the game is a very different game from what it was back then. Wintermines are a lot worse.
The game also never had 8 workers. 6 workers versus 8 workers is a big difference,
sure.
Even if you try to. So
absolutely. But I mean, excluding just the worker changes, 90% of the units are different.
Oh, in some way, yeah, they probably are.
Like, Liberators have been hard nerfed. Siege tanks have been changed. You don't have the weaker siege tanks of Heart of the Swarm, but you also don't have the tankovacs from early Legacy. You don't have the group drop mechanic of like the group overlord morph mechanic where you'd research dropalords on your hatchery and then every overlord became a dropalord. You don't have like you have oracles, but oracles no longer have infinite stasis wards, and revelation doesn't cost 50 energy instead of 25. Revelation is now a 20-second cooldown instead of a 40-second cooldown. Literally every fucking unit in the game is different in some way.
Yeah, there's no way we're going back to Heart of the Swarm.
You know what?
And also,
Marines
do we
changed.
want to? Like,
But
people
no,
are really remembering
Marines
this game with
changed.
rose-tinted glasses, if you ask me.
Even
Marines
Marines
changed?
have changed because Stim now takes 20 seconds less to research.
Oh, okay.
Yep.
I guess this.
Link
Alright.
speed is also less time.
Literally
right.
everything has changed.
Yeah.
Quite literally everything has changed. In fact, I think one of the few things that haven't changed is the Roach, which, has received the Ravager, but the Roach has basically fundamentally not changed as a unit outside of that.
But receiving the Ravager is a huge
there's other
change
things
too,
that
though.
have changed.
It
'Cause
is.
There's no force
And,
field.
like,
You can't
maybe
force
the
field a ramp.
True. But the reality is, you're not going to go back to that time. It's not going to work, and you can't do that.
Yeah. And I mean, yeah, I don't know. It's like, I just look at all this stuff and I just keep going back to, like, what are we gaining? Like, what is the gain of this? I just don't get it. Like, what are we actually getting out of this? It's the same game. I feel like this is only going to add more frustration. And
Yeah, actually,
I'll give my example for this is, I was playing, I played like 15, 20 PTR games. And in one of those games, I got cannon rushed. And it felt exactly the same as when I get cannon rushed with 12 workers, except it wasted an additional minute of my life. That was the only difference. It didn't feel great. It did not feel like an improvement.
It also became harder to hold because you're pulling a larger portion of your workers to hold a cannon rush.
Yeah, it's way more of your workers. Yeah, God.
This entire thing just feels so poorly thought out.
Yes. I mean,
It feels-
that's the best phrase for it, actually.
I'm
Yeah,
gonna
feels
poke-
very
I'm gonna
poorly
poke
thought
fun at
out.
it.
Sorry,
I'm gonna poke
did you
fun
have
at it
something?
because I was just going to say it feels like one person's trying to shove what they want into the game and nothing else.
Ace, have you ever experienced that with anything else in this game?
I don't know what you're caustic spray talking about. Moving on. No,
So I
I
guess-
wanted to say something actually. No, we're gonna move on from that. I wanted to say something because what you just said, Miro, kind of losing my train of thought a little bit here, but what you just said reminded me of as a point that I really wanted to harp on here, which is just the idea of like, so we're doing this to shake things up because the game is stale and we're going to shake things up by doing this. To me, this is the worst fucking dog shit tier of an argument you could ever make for changing StarCraft 2. Like, holy fucking shit, it's stupid. Oh my god. And I just cannot understand how people actually like see this as a good argument. I'll use Wardi's quote as an example here. I know I'm running over you trying to jump in here, but I want to finish what I'm saying here. Wardii says, why not just delete Terran from the game then? If we just want to change the game and change how people play, Just delete Terran, and then Terrans will all play differently because they'll be forced to play Protoss and Zerg. Change accomplished. Like, it's a terrible argument.
So, on the one hand, I don't disagree. Like, what they are trying to do is fundamentally change the game. And I think that's a terrible argument to fundamentally change the game. I don't think changing the game is necessarily a bad thing. That is why we had balance patches past, to fix issues in the game. But this is not fixing the issues in the game.
Yeah. You need an issue to fix. You need to actually... There be something you need to solve. Not just, you're bored. Play a different game if you're bored. I don't know what to say. I don't know. I mean, that's not really fair. Because, like, I can see people being bored with the meta, and they want the meta to be less stale. That's a fair point, right? But, like, saying that we should just shake things up and just hope that we end up with a better meta is literally just giving up. It's throwing up your hands and saying, I don't know how to fix the game, so instead I'm gonna maybe ruin it.
Okay.
It's like, what?
So here's the thing, right? I wanna bring something up because Epsilon just asked me this question, and the question was, when the changes were presented, either via patch notes or wherever the statements are added, did they extrapolate on the intention behind the change? I don't mean a general statement. I mean an explanation or train of thought that led to them. Yes, they have, but also no, they haven't, because the statement is very vague. They have some goals that is trying to allow players to remain competitive on 1-3 bases, which is not necessarily a bad idea, and you can do that via the other... We've harped on what about specifically the 8 worker chain, but we haven't actually touched on the mineral chain.
Yeah,
which
or the
goal of the mineral
changes.
Or the changes to to supply.
Oh yeah. Okay.
So,
which I think is actually the most annoying part of this. Like, it ruins your build order so much more than just the 8 worker does. Like, the fact that they did both, it's like, cool, so I can't do anything even approaching a normal build anymore. Sweet. Nothing lines up.
It had to, though, I feel like.
So, changing the 8 worker start means that you would always have to change the supply. I feel like you would have to, because otherwise you just spend all your money on nothing for a while, except workers. So this way, at least you're being forced to make an overlord, you're being forced to make a supply depot and get started until, you know, if you had the 2 extra supply, I suppose it would really make that much of a difference, but, you know, it just kind of feels weird not doing so. It's kind of the same reason they did that in the first place, is because it would feel weird not having that extra supply. But I guess what my point was is, like, the thought behind changing the viability of being on 1-3 bases for a little bit longer, I understand that. I can understand wanting that, but I don't think going back and changing the worker count accomplishes that. I actually think the mineral changes are far more impactful to accomplishing that than the worker change. The worker change takes all of that and throws that out the window. It literally just says to you, hey, we want you to spend time building workers.
I don't know. I don't know. The base count changes, like, they're huge. I don't know. I don't think they're quite as big, but they're definitely pretty huge. Because, like,
I'm gonna dig this in a little further. Okay, the base count changes. Like, I mentioned, I should say, that that's what they wanted to do, because if you look at the PTR, like, if you scroll up, you can actually see what they say, right, above the economy. And the thing is, we moved away from 1-3 base play for a reason. The reason was people did not like players turtling on 1-3 bases. So why are we trying to encourage turtling on 1-3 bases when we got rid of that because nobody wanted players to turtle on 1-3 bases? People don't like turtle play. They already complain enough about players turtling on 3 to 4 bases as it is currently. Literally every TVP that we've had at pro level in recent times, it has either been a 2-base all-in in an effort to avoid going to late game, or it has been a Protoss on 9 bases against a Terran player who is turtling on 4 bases who can't move out. See literally all of the turtle mech play that nobody likes facing because it is boring. Why are we trying to encourage turtling?
Yeah. What I think is craziest about this is, like, there's people who think, and I think even the patch kind of presents this as, like, a buff to aggression, and that's just nuts to me. It's like, if your base lasts longer, like, you're just gonna turtle on a lower base count for longer. Like, especially if the mineral count is, like, evened out like this. Like, I think, honestly, changing the mineral counts to, like, 1500, 900 or whatever it was one of the smartest changes that Legacy of the Void did. It was one of my favorite things. Like, I remember when I looked back at how things looked in Heart of the Swarm and stuff, and I was like, wait, what? And they just stay on that base forever? And then, like, I think Sax probably explained to me, like, yeah, because the minerals don't mine out, so you don't need to take another base. And I was like, what? Like, why would it be like that? It's weird. Like, it feels bizarre to me that you can, like, go for aggression, have it fail, and then be like, oh, that's fine, I'm just gonna macro out of it. It's like, what? What's the risk then? Like,
I mean, there's an element of that definitely does happen now. And I've harped on this in past episodes. You know, like, there's some element of certain builds allow you to macro out of them even if they don't do anything. And I'm going to point at Clem's 3cc 211. You know, the 211 build originally, prior to the 3cc iteration, was designed in such a way that you have to do damage, but it is a significant amount of pressure you're putting on. But if you don't do damage, you're going to be behind because they have 3 bases and a ton of drones, and you have 2 bases and you don't have any upgrades except stim, and you have your tech, but you are really behind on bases now. The 3cc version means that even though it hits, I don't know, 15, 30 seconds later, I think it hits at like 5:15, 5:30 instead of 4:45, which is what the 2-base version does. It hits slightly later, but because it hits slightly later and you have the advantage of having the 3rd CC, you don't have to do damage. You can just poke and prod and make them uncomfortable. Yep. All right?
Yep.
This is a less extreme variant, but like there are other builds from other races that you can commit very heavily to and not have it matter a bit if you do any damage, because just the threat of the pressure, cough, blink.
I was just going to say blink, you mean the 2 to 4 game blink?
Like, just the threat of blink pressure means that literally every single build you do in TVP has to have some way of dealing with this build, because if you don't, you straight up die.
Yep.
And if they go for blink and get nothing done, it doesn't matter, because they have enough pressure and danger on the map from just the presence of blink that they can macro out of it, even if they haven't done anything.
It's
so
funny,
that still exists. It still exists in Legacy of the Void, but it was arguably worse in Heart of the Swarm, because Heart of the Swarm also had a blink error. But you know what the difference between the Heart of the Swarm blink error and the blink error that we find ourselves in now is?
Tell me.
In the Heart of the Swarm, you had a shittier tank that didn't do anywhere nearly as much damage. You had the mothership core that had 11 sight range, so you could literally never snipe it. It was the earliest air unit, attacking air unit in the game to ever come out, and literally came out in the space of, I think it was like 1.5 minutes to 2 minutes. Okay, it is an extra 100 gas. I will give you that, but it also meant you didn't have to get a rowboat. You didn't have to do all the things that you would have to get out blink now, right? You don't have to get a warp prism because you could warp in off a pylon, which was a 3-second warp in, 3.5-second warp in back then. You had a faster blink, you had a stronger chrono, so you had all of these problems that as a Terran you had to deal with, and the only answer at the time was the Widow Mine, But the Widow Mine wasn't an answer back then because it was literally gutted. So you couldn't do any damage because the Mothership Core literally gave you a 2,000 hit point, 13 range cannon.
Yeah.
For the next 60 seconds.
Yeah, it's almost like turtling is kept in check by aggression and not by the fucking worker count or minerals at your bases. Like, I don't know. They call me a little bit crazy. I don't know, as the Zerg who absolutely hates playing against 3cc Terran and has no way to punish it, I don't know. It feels to me like maybe if we had not nerfed some of these aggression options, like, I don't know, the Ravager morph time or Nidus or Hatchtech Overlord drops, then we wouldn't see so much 3cc every game against Zerg. Which is, like you just said, in TVP, build. It's like you have to worry about Blink. So do you go straight to 3cc? No. It's not that hard to figure out.
If you're beyond, you might decide to do weird 3cc builds, because I don't know why he's been doing that recently in TVP, but he has, and it's been a very mixed bag for him, let me tell you.
Right.
Sometimes he gets away with it.
Oh my gosh, Defiance with the raid.
Oh, hi.
Welcome, everyone, joining our discussion here. Our heated discussion on balance of the worker changes and economy changes. Sorry, go ahead, Miro.
Yeah, it was just, I actually think I was done with what I was saying, but basically, changes for the sake of changes and changes to the economy. I understand why they might want to do it. I don't think they're going about it in the right manner, and I don't think encouraging turtling by increasing the amount of minerals you have in your base is going to do what they want. None of this, as L1 said in chat, none of this has actually encouraged you to change the way you play.
Agreed. Yeah, I mean, it seems like, it's all... They're changes for the sake of changes to get things shaken up and different, but it's not going to fix any core issues, and I think the way to fix core issues, as we often talk about, Miro, if people are annoyed with, straight to late game macro and stale games, then the answer is to buff some aggression and introduce some interesting maps into the map pool. It's not to randomly change things and hope for the best. I don't think that that's a very well-guided approach. I think just randomly stabbing in the dark and hoping for the best is like a really dumb idea. I don't think that we should be doing this.
And again, like I want to reiterate, right? The natural state of the game as players get better and as things as players improve and figure out how to hold the specific builds that would otherwise be a threat to them, will naturally trend towards a more macro-oriented game. And if you left the game as it was, you will end up going towards macro-oriented games because you get better at holding the more aggressive, cheesy thing. And that's fine. Macro-oriented games aren't a bad thing. What is a problem is when every game is a macro game. And every game goes to late game. And every game ends up on 5 bases or 7 bases and split map scenarios. We don't want that. And while we're not quite at the point where every game is a split map scenario, we have had
damn
that better in
close.
the past, and it is damn close.
And I mean, it wasn't that long ago when we basically were in that meta. That was what, like 2020 or something like that? Like, we had that meta.
We had that meta a couple of years ago as well with Maru, and Maru is...
Yeah, like we've had that a couple times, I feel like, since like 2018.
And we definitely have that in TVP at the moment.
It was like a Serral versus some Protoss, I forget. Zaun, maybe? On, what was that map like?
We had Serral We had Serral versus Classic in EWC, which was a split map scenario as well.
Yeah, that split. I'm talking about that split map that lasted for like way too long, and then it ended up in this like weird base trade, and then people were like, "Oh my god, it's Evan's killing me here. I looked like the SC1 vulture." What does he say? Fuck, I need my vulture quotes now. What does he say?
Oh god, I don't know.
I actually love that unit. Yeah, vulture's a badass. I'm not sure if he was talking shit, but I'm taking it as a compliment.
Yeah, this entire thing, I feel like is a misguided attempt at bringing StarCraft back into the light. And I don't think that bringing StarCraft back into the light is a bad thing. We want more players. We want more people to enjoy StarCraft. We want more people to join StarCraft. But this is not going to be how that happens.
Totally. Well, there is one potential thing that I do have to bring up that might come from this that would be good from StarCraft. And I'm slightly biased here because I really like this streamer, but Atrioc has been streaming a bunch of Age of Empires 2 and like knows Hera, I guess. And I'm not like a massive fan of him or AoE, but he also used to enjoy StarCraft 2. And from my understanding, he enjoys the slower pace of AoE 2 and might do some StarCraft 2 stuff if we lower the worker count, and that would definitely bring in viewers because he's a massive streamer. So that could be good for the scene, but that's because the streamer likes it, not because it's good for the game.
So
just want to make that clear.
I actually want to touch on this, and I'm sorry if I'm interrupting anyone, but you can't understate just how important big streamers are for a game like StarCraft. I'm going to point at Grubby for this, because Grubby basically single-handedly revitalized fucking Warcraft, I think it was. Yeah. Right? Like,
yeah.
He basically single-handedly brought it back to life because he was a big streamer with a big following who got really into Warcraft 3, and now Warcraft 3 is booming.
Yeah, there's like half a dozen YouTube video essays on that topic alone about how he revived Warcraft. Yeah. And
it would be nice if StarCraft had something like that. Like, imagine fucking Tyler 1 getting into StarCraft 2.
Like, yeah. Right? Yeah. Like, that would be crazy. Like, and that could totally happen. Yeah.
Yeah, it could.
And Worker Start could be one of the things that does that. But so that's where it gets kind of weird, because it's like, that would be a little bit of a devil's bargain. Because it's like, it might revitalize StarCraft, but it would also be bad for the game. You know what I mean? So it's like, I mean, I don't know.
On the other hand, I don't want a player like a Velo coming back to the game.
Right?
No matter how big a
why not?
What? Yeah.
Yeah, like, obviously I have nothing against these guys, but the reality is, like, a big streamer could do wonders for the game, but it could also be really bad for the game. Who knows?
Totally. How revitalizing... Sorry,
I'm not gonna say,
I should have been more specific. Seven Spooks is asking how revitalizing StarCraft would be bad for the player base. I meant the 8 workers start, which would lead to, potentially, revitalizing the community. The 8 workers start would be bad for the game, even if it has a good effect of revitalizing the community, if that makes any sense. Like, it would be good for the scene, potentially, but the game itself, it would be bad for, if that makes sense.
Okay. I want to touch on something that LO1 mentioned as well, and that is the thing about starting with worker count, lower worker count, doesn't slow down the actual phase of the game. And I think we mentioned this earlier. It slows down the start of the game, but it doesn't slow down the actual game, because at some point you're going to get to the point where you still have to interact with your opponent. And the moment you have to interact with your opponent, suddenly you still have all of these other things that you have to do. You still have to macro, you still have to micro, you still have to put down bases, you still have to keep building SCVs, you still have to keep producing, you still have to do your injects, you still have to do your chronos, you still have to do all of the things you had to do before. You just delayed having to do them for a minute and a half.
And now they don't line up cleanly with any of your old builds anymore.
Yeah. now watching Starcraft.
I mean, we'll figure it out. We'll get it to line up again.
Yeah, we will. Yeah. But now watching Starcraft has become more painful because now instead of having the 3 minutes of downtime that we have currently when, a Reaper is dancing back and forth with 4 Zerglings, now you have 3 minutes of making workers and the 3 minutes of 1 Reaper dancing back and forth with 4 Zerglings.
It is very boring.
And look, it's going to be... That is obviously slightly hyperbolic, but the reality is that the moment things start trending towards a macro game again, and they will, as we've been harping on, and I have been harping on in particular, the moment things start trending back towards that direction, the game will just the slowness of the start of the game will drag on for a really long time. But you're still not interacting with your opponent. You're still not doing anything to interact with your opponent. The only time you're going to be interacting with your opponent is if you're cheesing them. Yep.
Which, as we all know, the player base loves. I don't know.
Yeah.
I'm fucking around a little bit because I do definitely understand that playing against cheese and being frustrated by cheese is weirdly one of the things that needs to be in StarCraft, even if we all pretend to hate it. You know what I mean? It's just a reality of how humans are wired. If it's not challenging and frustrating us, we're probably gonna get bored with it. So I don't know. It's we do need that stuff to a degree.
Well, no, you bring up this is the thing that confuses me, right? You bring up how much the community hates cheese, but what they are wanting to see is more cheese. You were wanting to see more one-base builds, more one-base aggression. You're wanting to see more of these timings and more of these weird things. That's fine. But the moment it happens, and the moment it happens to you, nobody wants to do it. Nobody wants to see it. Nobody wants to deal with it, and you start complaining.
Yeah. Whoever earlier brought up, God, who is that? Somebody brought up a quote about players not being good at giving solutions, but they're good at diagnosing problems. I think that's very accurate. Yeah, I mean, it's really kind of a shame that we're just throwing spaghetti at the wall here and seeing what sticks, rather than, as Heaven said, what I think we would all love to see is Blizzard coming back to the game. Because that, I would agree. I think that's probably the only way that StarCraft actually has a chance of legitimately being revived. I think until then we're still on life support as we've been for every year. We're is this going to be the last year of competitive StarCraft? And the consensus that we've sort of reached at this point is probably not. There's probably always going to be some level of competitive StarCraft as long as there's servers and a way for us to play against each other. The question is really just how much support and how much hype is there, and is there enough support for pros to actually support a career and things like that. That's really the bigger questions that are about what the state of StarCraft is right now.
I also want to be very clear, right? None of these opinions have been formed off just seeing the patch notes.
True.
At least for myself and Ace, we have both played a number of games on the PTR. So we're not talking out of our asses. We have actually tried these changes, both in custom
really
games.
Gave him a shot.
In custom games,
I did not like it.
with each other and with some other friends, and on ladder, on the PTR ladder. So we have actually given them a shot. Now, there have already been a number of videos made by Harstem, Wardii, Zombiegrub, Pig, Uthermal on the changes and playing the changes. So there's more than enough material out there to also kind of start judging for yourself. But I also think playing on the PTR is kind of important to get a feel for it.
Yeah, I would agree.
And the reality
Especially
is,
for the people who think they like the change. I think you should try it. I think you should try it.
Yeah. Yeah.
I think that half the people, at least, who say that they're going to like this change are not actually going to like this change.
I have played.
How many games of
about...
PTR? Oh, yeah.
Okay, that's a good question. That's a good question of heaven. I've played about 50 at the moment.
Oh, you played more than me then. Damn.
Yeah,
I played like 15, 20.
Quite a few.
I think I played 20, roughly. A little bit less. I think I counted and it was like 18, but there's probably like a custom game or two in there. So it's probably like 15, 20. And then, of course, I mean, we've all messed around with like the SC Evo, like reduced worker counts. And then also like when Legacy of the Void launched, I remember, and Brock, you can back me up here, we did experiment with some of those mods that reduce the starting worker count at the start of Legacy of the Void. I don't know if you remember that.
Oh, that sounds familiar.
Yeah,
but
yeah.
Because Wiz used to throw us in those kind of things all the time.
So,
of course it was Wiz, yeah.
It's interesting that you mentioned that, because there have actually been a number of tournaments that players have, paid other people to actually play on. Pig did a tournament where they did low worker counts, and they did a number of games with like 3 workers or 5 workers or 7 workers or 9 or whatever. However,
I think it was a roll.
They had a few roll. They had a few where they rolled it as well, right?
Oh, interesting.
And I thought
that was a joke that I said. I said that recently. I was like, why don't we just roll a d12 at the start to see how many workers we have?
Yeah, I think it was between like 4 and 10 or something like that, but yeah.
Yeah, so I thought that my understanding was from that tournament specifically, the general consensus was that it really didn't make that much of a difference at all.
Except I thought the consensus was it did make some difference.
It made a little bit of a difference, but it really depended on how low you dragged the worker count.
Yeah. I mean, I think like as we kind of talked a little bit about earlier, I think the main thing is like, because tech is really powerful in StarCraft, there's always going to be people who, when the game starts, no matter how low their worker count is, they're going to think about taking gas. And that is going to slow the game down a lot. So, I don't know. It's like, I like seeing scrappier games and stuff like that, but the fact that it's like so slow and so scrappy, like that's just not enjoyable to me. Like, it is excruciatingly painful to me to not be able to spend all my money in StarCraft 2. To just like have larva there, and I like want to spend the larva and I can't do anything with it. And it's like, why? Because you're in the early game, and I'm like, why is the early game so slow then? Like, why did we just design the game this way?
It's interesting.
So, yeah, I don't like it.
That, right? Because I know Lorimbo made a thread earlier, and I linked it to you earlier today.
Yeah.
But his thread is literally called "The Death of Cheese from a Professional Cheeser," and while it doesn't mention cheese from other races, he's a Zerg cheeser primarily. The thread basically boils down to, if you are trying to cheese as a Zerg, you basically can't do it short of doing an 8 or 10 pool and having a build order win.
Yep.
Doesn't happen anymore. You can't do it anymore because tech actually gets out fast enough that you can still defend any cheese, but you have less units, so that those tech units are even stronger. So now you don't have the numbers to be able to punish or push against a tech. So the amount of units that you would get is hampered significantly. And then, skipping a queen, you run out of lava, or to hit the timing correctly, or there's so many different things that have now been lost, I feel like. And that's not to say that there aren't timings that we couldn't hit, because the reality is that if we're changing the work count, then the timings shift and weak points shift. So you would essentially have to, I don't want to say start again because you're not really starting again, but you have to figure out what the new timings are and if you can ever hit those new timings for each race.
Yeah.
And it does feel like it is more difficult to hit those weak point timings.
Yeah, like where you're trying to like hit that like surgical snipe on that pylon. You know what I mean? Yeah, it's gonna be harder to map that out for a little while at least. But then it is just sort of harder in general because like I'll kind of try to summarize what Lorimbo was saying in that thread. We should probably just link it in the description when this ends up going on YouTube. But
yes,
yeah. So like the thing that really stood out to me because like he was talking about 12 pool. And I 12 pool quite frequently in ZVZ, so I'm familiar with a few different 12 pool builds. And the thing that he said that stood out to me was like he just like outlines, you know, how you get up to 12 workers, right? It's like people are saying, you know, oh, it's only 45 seconds difference or whatever, blah blah blah. But he's like, okay, you know, you start the game, you have 3 larvae, you make those into drones, and then you're at 11 or whatever, right? And then you can go up to 12, and you know he outlines like how you do the overlord and everything, right? But the main point that he was trying to highlight here was once you reach 12, you have 0 larvae. You have no larvae, which is very different than starting the game with 12 workers and 3 larvae. So it's like, yeah, we're at a different point in the game. Roughly, it's only like 45 seconds later, and the worker count is the same. But the Zerg has no larvae. And the other race doesn't work that way, doesn't have that problem. Like, you just have that one production queue, and you're making those workers out of it, and then if you're making a gateway or, you know, a barracks or whatever, then you have that gateway or barracks, right? And it's the same for you. It's just delayed by 45 seconds. But for Zerg, we don't have those larvae. So now it's like, okay, now if you want to, you know, like for my version of a 12 pool, I would be wanting to make 3 drones and then sending the first drone to my extractor and making that into a gas immediately so that I can go straight to a baneling nest as fast as possible. Because that's my cheese in ZVZ. Can't do that. You know, even if you go straight up to the 12 workers or whatever, you have no larvae. So you can't make those 3 more, and now you're just like floating money. Like, it just doesn't work. So, I mean, it's not just that we like shifted everything out a little bit. It's like we've messed everything up here, and everything is going to be totally different. So we really just have no idea how things are going to shake out, and we literally are just hoping for the best here, which I think is not a good plan for saving Starcraft. I think we can do better. Got a lot of smart people in the community. I think we can figure out something better than this.
Yeah, I agree. But the problem with this is, right, we're not just making changes in isolation. You're making changes with other drastic changes. And we don't really want to touch on the other drastic change at the moment, because that's going to be a whole nother topic next week. But the econ changes can't be viewed in isolation because the other changes directly impact how that race plays as well, like how Protoss plays as well.
Yeah, Protoss might legit be in trouble right now. Yep. Oh, is the... Wait, hang on. Uh-oh. Say something? Didn't they hear you? Oh no, hang on. Oh no, Discord audio broke when I switched headphones. I'm sorry. I'll fix it. That was like a second ago. It wasn't that long. But shit, yeah. Let me fix this. Sorry, guys. Thank you for saying something, because I would not have noticed this otherwise. Say something, Miro?
Yeah. So I was just saying
I think we're good
that
now.
I was just saying that the changes can't even be viewed in isolation because there's two really massive changes that are happening simultaneously. So it's really hard to get data on either set of changes. If you're trying to get data on the Protoss changes, you can't also have the economic changes that are skewing data for the Protoss changes, and vice versa. If you're trying to get data on the economic changes, you can't have data with the Protoss changes because they completely skew everything for the economic changes.
Yeah.
So you can really only look at, I guess, 4 out of the 6 matchups.
Yeah, and it's a little bit weird. Like, mirror matchups, it's, like, kind of hard to evaluate, you know?
Yeah, and mirror
like, the
matchups
choices
are
are very different. I don't know. Like, even... God, like, even TVZ is weird, too, though, because, like, the Ghost has been changed massively, and Carapace is way less money. Like, that's huge! Like,
yeah.
But
Yeah,
we'll
but
get into this more next
point,
week,
though.
I think.
That's kind of the point
yeah.
of like balance changes rather than like fundamental things within StarCraft. Like changing warp gate, that's not a balance change. That is a fundamental change to how
it's a
the race
huge design change. Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
And thank you for the follow, Heaven. Yeah, I mean, this has been a massive, massive patch. And it's really hard to say how this is going to actually shake out for the health of the game. But I think that there's quite a few people who, like us, feel that this maybe is not the best attempt that we could give, and that StarCraft deserves better, and that this is potentially dangerously risky. You know, if you ask me, at least. I think Miro would agree.
Yeah, I would.
Yeah.
Brock as well.
Yeah, I was kind of on the fence initially. I was more leaning towards this could be good, but especially all of it together and hearing other people's perspectives on it, because I just haven't been able to dive into a whole lot of people's views on it. It's like, yeah, I definitely see what you guys mean.
Well, I think we've talked this maybe to death for now.
Yeah.
I don't know if we have much more that we really want to get into, but I would like if you guys are available to play some games in a minute here.
Yeah, I can do a few.
How much you guys have? Yeah.
I
don't want to be streaming for too incredibly long here, but we got a healthy 20 StarCraft enjoyers here, and we should let them enjoy some StarCraft. Wouldn't you say?
Yes, I unfortunately cannot join you guys.
Oh.
At the moment.
That's okay.
Oh. Alright, well, I'm happy to do a couple of PTR games with you, though.
Sounds good, sounds good. So how about this? How about I'll put it on a break here, and then we'll come back in 5:10, and we'll do some games. And thank you everybody watching now and in the future who enjoyed their episode today. And we'll be talking more about the other balance changes next week, as we previously said.